Hello, viewer out there. My name is Muhammad Abubakar, welcoming you to another edition of the program Reflections. In the program, we try to reflect on the life of those prominent Nigerians that have made the country proud in their respective endeavors. Our guest today is Elder Eteng Ibiang Eteng, GP, Fellow Nigeria Institute of Estate Surveyors and Valuers, and a Fellow Chartered Institute of Corporate Administrators. Our guest was born on the 6th of July 1944 at Idomi, in Yaku local government area of the present day's Cross River State in the southern part of Nigeria. Our guest is a product of Church of Scotland Mission School in Idomi. He is also a product of Hope Waddell, the prestigious Hope Waddell Training Institution in Calabar, that is Cross River State, and most importantly, an alumni of the prestigious University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Join me to welcome Elder Eteng Ibiang Eteng in the program. Sir, you are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, viewers. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, it is the tradition of the program to allow the guest share with the viewer the little he can remember about his humble background. What would the viewer know, sir, about your humble background?
Thank you so much for this privilege. And I think based on your introductory statement, I feel flattered being numbered among the saints. All I had seen on your program were very reputable people, men who had lived lives, great lives, worthy of emulation. For me to have that privilege, to me, is something that humbles me. And that, talking about humbling me, reminds me of my humble beginnings. As a young little boy born into a peasant family of a mother and a father who were both peasants and living in a pure rural community, which had not even a road. Indeed, if you consider that I was born in 1944, and the first vehicle that went to my place was able to get there only in 1956, many years after I had been born. You can imagine, and with great difficulty, you can imagine the community I came from. There were difficult terrains that made it difficult for us to have roads then. And of course, the present Calabar-Ikom road was never thought of then. So movement out of my place to anywhere was usually by foot. At the most, you had to go by a bicycle or be ferried by a bicycle. And so it was. That's the kind of background I came from, purely rural. And I found myself translated into urban settings without any special, I can't describe how I got there, but I was so translated by the special will of God and grace. Yes.
Okay. Sir, earlier on I told the viewer that you are the product of Church of Scotland Mission School in Idomi.
Yes.
And also a product of Hope Waddell Training Institution in Calabar. Share with the viewer your educational sojourn in these two institutions.
Yes, like you said, I want to recall that my educational days began, my adventure into education began when I was relatively young. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but those were days when to be accepted to start in what we call the Infant 1 class. There were no kindergartens then. We had infant classes, then primary classes, elementary classes. Yes, so those were days when to be admitted into school, you had to show evidence that you could cross your right hand right over your head and touch your left ear. If you could touch your left ear, you were considered matured enough to start school. Yes. And I barely achieved that. So I barely achieved that. And because I was relatively young, in the first year, I was in a class anyway with standard forms provided. In the second year, my mom had to. Incidentally, I'm an only child, the ninth, the last and only child who survived of my mother.
What happened to the 8?
Others were either stillborn or died in infancy or that sort of a thing. The background to this is another story. The primary school, which I went through, I went up to standard 5, because by Hope Waddell standards, you couldn't be admitted into Hope Waddell if you did standard 6. All admissions were from either standard 4 or 5. And I tried Hope Waddell from standard 4, but a relation advised my mom that I was too small. So I had to take off from standard 5. And standard 5, I moved on, passed the entrance, passed the interview, and went into Hope Waddell in 1957. So my first time school fees were paid £12, 2 pence.
By your old woman?
By my mother. The 2 pence was for the stamp to be put on the receipt. The £12 was the tuition and boarding. And so after that journey, they came back, and my mom said, get ready to go to school. So I had to go to school from January 1957. Yes. That's how the first trigger was pulled. That put me into space.
Okay, so how was the school experience?
Wonderful experience. Hope Waddell had and still has a name. It's unfortunate that there is a debate as to whether educational standards have gone down or not. People would tell you they haven't, because students learn more than we learned in our time. But we had traditions, we had ceremonials, and we had the type of discipline and training which I can still remember was what today directs my life. Yes. For instance, each morning, our principal had to come on an inspection of all the dormitories while we stood by our beds. And he goes past. These inspections daily maintained the tidiness of the compound. Today, I doubt if such things.
Even physical presence of students.
Now, again, in that school, after every year, those students who passed out, their results usually would be presented before the entire school, read student after student, and the score. So it became an inspiration. It became an inspiration to the serious-minded students. Students then said to themselves, I set myself this type of a target. Number two, Hopewell was one school that produced great names that we knew, like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Gunira, is it Guniron Gunsaya, you know. There were great guys, like the former premier of Midwest, a former premier of Midwest, and several others, a ninja with them, and so forth.
What about the ones you can remember in your set?
One thing about us, about the school, was that today you find those who are prominent were those who had military traditions or had interest in military traditions. Most Hopewell students were not trained to be militant. They were trained to be gentle, disciplined, self-controlled, and professional. So you find them more in the professions. You find them in the professions. You found some of them in, in diplomacy and the public service and what have you. You don't find them in politics because we did not learn what politics requires of people today, which is the game of gambling, not just gambling, but dribbling people and not being straight. A typical Hopewell trained person is a straightforward person. If he says this, he means it, and he says it as he sees it. Yes.
Okay, so what about the curriculum of the school?
The curriculum was such that from about class 1 up to class 3, you spent time doing nothing but general knowledge. No, you're not introduced to the syllabus for the then Cambridge school certificate, or what later after my set became West African school certificate. The curriculum required you to have an all-round knowledge. All-round knowledge.
When you say all-round, you mean arts and science?
Arts, you are taught general things of general knowledge and general importance. General science, social studies, things like that, you know, of a general nature, things that don't seem to matter, but at the end, you find how relevant they become. Now, by the time you get into class 4, those last 2 years, class 4 and 5, were the critical years when the school focused on the syllabus. And usually, in Hopewell, the students in school certificate may come out with a few in Division 1, a larger number in Division 2, and a small number in Division 3.
So in your own case?
I came out with a Division 1. I came out with a Division 1.
Which year was that?
That was in 1961. 1961, December. Yes. That's when I did my Cambridge school certificate. It was foreign then. Yes. So I came out with a Division 1. The point I want to make is that in many government schools at that time, if, for instance, you took a government secondary school or a government college, you'll find the students right from class 1, they are taught the syllabus to class 5. And so by class 5, they are scoring, more of them are in either Division 1 and a few in Division 2, maybe very, very negligible in 3. Now, in spite of that, what looks like a difference, usually when we go to the universities, the self-study, the kind of way we were brought up, makes us more competent to deal at the university level.
At the university.
Exactly. In fact, Ibadan University conducted a test. I understood. I have not read the script, but somebody told me they did a test because they discovered that Hope Waddell students who had Division 2 performed most often better than students from government colleges who made Division 1 and that sort of thing. They turned out better.
So when in 1961 you obtained the Cambridge certificate,
yes,
what followed next?
I had thought that was the end of my school, my secondary school studies, but it was not to be, by divine appointment. I had taken entrance and passed into what we call the post-secondary school. I had taken the entrance and passed. But because I was an Eastern Regional Scholarship student, Eastern Region was paying £50 for my fees. And then the balance was my parents. And it was stressful for my parents. So by the end of that year, as I was to leave, I was weeping because I realized there was something more to do, which I couldn't cover. I wept, but there was nothing I could do because I knew my parents couldn't afford to pay. But something happened around August of 1961. August of 1961, I was on a holiday in Ohafia in Abia State, visited my half-brother. I was there on holidays when the acting principal, after Sir Francis Ibiang had been appointed governor in 1960, an acting principal of the school, a white man, Reverend William Akins, was now appointed an acting principal. So he was acting. Fantastic mathematician, a great scientist and engineer, practical. This man came to Ohafia with one of my classmates and conducted a late entrance into Hope Waddell. And I got to hear they were conducting the entrance. So I went there to greet them and see what they were doing. And when I got there, my friend asked me to come and help them supervise the entrance. So while we did this, Reverend Aitken now called me aside and said, I hope you're coming back to Hopewell to do the HSC. I said, no, sir, I am not sure. He said, even with a scholarship? I said, no, sir, I'm not sure, because my parents have had it difficult getting me through school certificate. So he just shook his head and left. He didn't say more. I followed them Abriba on a sightseeing, from there to Abakaliki, and then back. They dropped me and went. No. Sorry, we went to Enugu.
Okay.
When we went to Enugu, he went to see Sir Francis Ibiang, then governor.
Okay.
The important thing here,
Yes.
I must tell you, is that I didn't know that in spite of my reservations, Reverend Aitken had included my name among students whose scholarships should be extended.
Okay. So one issue I want us to talk about is your days in the university.
Yes.
Because I read in your CV that you are a product of University of Nigeria in Nsukka. So what is the story? What briefly do you have to share with the viewer?
Well, I tried the university, would I say, about 3 years. The first year was 1964. I was teaching in Community Secondary Grammar School, Ugep. And when these chances were advertised, I applied. But then I applied to do geography, to read geography in the university. Because then, I don't know, I developed some kind of interest in joining the army. Why? Because we had one military officer, late Major Edet, who was trying to woo me into the army. He tried in my school set, after my school set, to woo me. I wasn't interested. He tried in my HSC to woo me. I wasn't interested either. But when I came out, I was teaching. I wanted geography because I thought it would enhance my performance in the army. I got the admission in 1964 to go in September. But no sooner I applied, I lost interest in that course. I lost interest in the course. In the geography.
So much liked it.
Yes, I wanted it because of getting into the army. Then I came to discover that some friends of mine were talking. One friend of mine got admission to do estate management. So I said, that's the course I want to do.
So you applied?
So in 65, I applied for estate management.
The same university?
The same university. Usually, only a few would be taken. Very few. So a few were taken. I was placed on the waiting list. And that 1965, I was invited to Lagos, the old Senate building, for scholarship interview, federal scholarship. I went. And what did I have to show? A small handwritten note by the registrar saying that I was placed second on the waiting list. I went before that interview panel, showed that paper, and answered the questions that were placed before. At the end of the day, I won the scholarship. I got the scholarship with one of my professional colleagues who became a national president. President of estate surveyors. Yes. Now, unfortunately, Nsukka did not call me, but I held a scholarship, that 1965. And that scholarship was preserved for me. 66, I reapplied. This time, the university interviewed us. And in the course of the interview, I was taken.
Okay.
Yes. That's how I got in to do estate management in 1966.
And as God will have it, it marked the beginning of your career in
the profession.
The profession, estate management.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Briefly, how was life in the university?
It was a very pleasant time, made most pleasant by a professor, now emeritus, but one highly honored in estate management, Professor J. Ume. Professor Ume was one man who was a head of department, dean. He was extremely interested in me, and he made my life comfortable
in the university.
When I finished, fortunately, about 3 months before I took the degree, the federal public service came to the university to interview us. 5 of us from my class were interviewed, but I was the only one who was picked and given a federal lands officer job. Even before I wrote my degree exam. So you can see the contrast now between employment today and employment in our time. Yes. So I had an appointment ever before I wrote this thing, but it was going to be subject to my passing. And when I finished and got cleared, I went to Lagos and spent 2 weeks at the Independence Building, Lands Department. But I had a horrible experience as a result of Lagos traffic. I found that to get into office in the morning, I would have to wake 4 o'clock, start a journey around 4:30 from Surulere, and then only able to get into the island and be in the office by about 8:30, late. Those were days when offices started around 7:30. I would get there late, exhausted already. And then work closes at 3:30, and 4 o'clock we hit the road, with all the scramble for vehicles. And I would only be able to get back to my home by between 7 and 8 in the night. This was going to be the routine every day. And for 2 weeks, I said no. I couldn't cope with that type of life. I remembered my mother. I said, this one here would take me away from my mother. I said, I won't continue with this. I left. I had to leave.
You abandoned the job?
I left the job and went straight to the then Cross River State and reported to the Civil Service Commission. I reported myself. I told them I have a federal scholarship, I have a federal job, but the next day they gave me an appointment, 11th of July, as a land officer.
Viewer, if you are just joining us, the program is Reflections, and where we have Elder Eteng Ibiang Eteng as our guest. At the beginning of the program, I forgot to tell you that Elder Eteng Ibiang is the brain behind the establishment of Gwarimpa Housing Estate, the second largest housing estate in Nigeria, of course, after Festac Town. Sabi, you were telling the viewer how after abandoning the job in Lagos, you came back to Southeastern State as a young land officer.
Yes. I spent 13.5 years in the service of the then Southeastern State, translated to Cross River State. I worked there for these 13.5 years and rose to the position of an assistant chief lands officer. In fact, the number 2. And that was when an opening cropped up in the Federal Housing Authority. They say history repeats itself. Now, I had to apply when I got to know from a friend that there was a position in the Federal Housing Authority, an assistant general manager, properties, in the year 1985. I got to know. So about July or June I got to know. And so I applied immediately. And it was made, I was made to believe that in no long time, the issue would be sorted out and the jobs, whoever succeeded would get the job. I waited until August. There was a coup. 1985, August coup. Yes, which brought General Babangida into office. The present head of state. Yes. When that happened, I said, to hell with Lagos and Lagos jobs. And at that material time, there were a couple of people, even from Southeastern State or Cross River State, who were being killed in Lagos, assassinated in Lagos. There were crimes all over the place. And I thought, no, I didn't need that atmosphere.
That made you to hate.
Yes, yes. I didn't want to think of Lagos anymore. I forgot about the job. From around that August, I forgot about the job. What happened? Until about December, when Christmas came, I took my family home to the village on holidays. And we decided to come back on the 31st of December. When we came back, I settled the family at home and took my car to a mechanic garage directly opposite my house along MCC Road, Calabar. I was there trying to service my car. When a gentleman came, I saw a car painted green. That came, a Peugeot car, 504 car, parked on the road. And a gentleman, very well dressed, walked out of the car from the owner's corner and came to the workshop, called out one of the workers there and was asking him, please, where is number 132 MCC Road? I overheard that. As soon as I overheard that, I walked across and told the gentleman, without waiting for anything, I am number 132 MCC Road. So he now stretched his hand forward to shake me and asked me in Efik, Mbok Afokeredidia, please, what is your name?
And you told him?
I told him. So he introduced himself to me and told me he was a DGM administration in Federal Housing Authority. He came with a letter of appointment. So I told the mechanics, please, later I'll see you. Continue what you're doing. And I walked him across to my house. We got to my house and I picked a letter from him. And you can imagine what sort of joy came from this. Now I want to say that that appointment came through the then Major Kama, Aliu Kama, who retired as Brigadier General Kama. He was the military administrator, FH. I didn't go through any interview. All I remember is that I applied, attached my credentials, attached a testimonial my former boss in Cross River gave me. I attached it. So the man looked at that. I came when I was being, registered on reporting. I saw a minute as brief. You know how the military,
yes.
DGM admin, please appoint this man. Full stop, and signed. Aliu Kama had never known me. He had never known me.
He's a northerner.
He's a northerner from Adamawa. From, what is it now? Adamawa.
Adamawa.
He's from Adamawa.
Well, you are from Cross River.
I'm from Cross River. Said, DGM admin, please appoint this man. Those were the words. He signed, Aliu Kama. That was it. That's what put me into FH.
Federal Housing Authority.
Yes.
Sir, I would want you to educate the viewer between who is an estate valuer and surveyor, the difference between the two.
Yeah. There's a word, a common word, which you find running through not just the two professions you're referring to. There are land surveyors who might be called licensed surveyors. There are estate surveyors and valuers. There are also quantity surveyors. But you have other forms of surveyors, who use that term. Essentially, a surveyor is somebody who inspects and takes out data in respect of whether land, property, or whatever, and does some professional service therewith. That's what it is. The one who uses a theodolite, almost like this, your camera, a theodolite, or he uses other modern instruments like the, what do you call it? There are other specialized instruments they can hold like this, and they are taking measurements, taking directions, and so forth, without a theodolite. All of them belong to the licensed surveyor. They do more of taking data to produce maps and levels. But the estate surveyor is the one who conducts valuations. He advises, by valuations I mean putting society, they build up society's estimation, the value society puts on property, whether it be land, or it be houses, or it be trees, or whatsoever, or machinery. That is an estate surveyor and valuer. I spent 18.5 years with Federal Housing Authority. 11 of those years, I was an executive director in charge of estate services.
Okay. That reminds me, sir, about what I read in your CV. What do you have to share with the viewer on Festac Town Housing Estate?
Yes.
That is Lagos, and the Gwarimpa Housing Estate.
Those two estates you have mentioned, the two of them are the trump cards, but they are not in any way the only estates the federal housing has developed. Now, Festac, to begin with, is actually the largest estate in terms of land size. It spanned through 2,024 point something hectares. That's an equivalent of 20.24 kilometers square. That's Festac Town. This is in terms of the land size available to Festac Town. Now, in terms of the development as at when I knew and left FHA, Festac Town had in their phase 1 a total of 11,000, I think about 600 housing units of various categories. There were 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. They were of the low income, which were found either in bungalows or in, blocks of flats on 4 floors. There were also medium income housing in bungalows, storage buildings, and also high income housing in those groups. The good thing about Festac was that part of the development was by government. The other part, the FHA gave out plots and individuals developed. Now, right now, I understand there are also schemes for partnership with other people, groups of organized developers also putting in more structures and sharing the profits with FH. Now, Gwarimpa was an estate I conceptualized.
You yourself?
I conceptualized Gwarimpa estate. I cannot contend this with anybody, and nobody would contend it with me, because I can tell you today how Gwarimpa came about. Gwarimpa was a result of what came over FHA as a result of the National Housing Program of Chief Jakonde. Chief Jakonde had introduced, yes, a former governor of Lagos State and a former minister of Works and Housing, under which was FHA. When he came in as a minister in 1994, he took over as a minister. He decided to carry out a national housing program. The concept was totally his. And he decided to do it through FHA, not through the ministry. And so wanted to restructure FHA to suit that purpose. The concept of his national housing program was that there were going to be categories of houses, the low-income houses, which would be sold low, even if they cost more. And in fact, they cost more than the prices he put on them. And so they were meant to produce a deficit. The program couldn't continue because FHA wanted a review of the prices of the low income. And that caused FHA to raise prices. I was involved in what I'm talking about. This raising of low-income prices caused a lot of people to rush on FHA to collect their deposits.
That also became a problem.
It became a problem because all the monies that were earlier deposited had been turned into concrete. And having been turned into concrete, FHA had no money to refund. So that's why refunds became a problem. And this plagued FHA and gave FHA a horrible, bad name. It was at this point that it became necessary for new ideas, resourceful thinking to come in place. I now called the guys I had in my department, land surveyors, estate surveyors, and town planners, and said, come with me. In fact, I had 2 general managers and 1 surveyor 2 general managers I had, one Lawa and one Ofojindu, Amobi Ofojindu. I said, come with me along with one surveyor to FCT. I walked into FCT and told FCT, please, all along you used to give us 20 hectares, 30 hectares, 40 hectares, 60 hectares, and so forth. In a short time, we are finished and we are coming back for more. Please give us districts. Give us a whole district. Then I thought a district was super large. They agreed. That's when they now marked out for us a part of what is Gwarimpana. But that part they sent to us first was about 400 hectares. And it included the hills you would find towards, life camp area. I looked at that plan as they sent it with the allocation letter, called my chaps and said, no, please look at this plan. It seems to me what is incorporated here is more these hills around life camp. We cannot develop that. So I wrote to FCT and thanked them for the offer, but pointed out that because we needed to build affordable houses, we needed a better terrain than what they gave us, that we would like to have the low-lying land towards the Kubwa Express. I went there, and it was quick time. It was like a favor. I had a favor from FCT friends. They gave us a whole bulk, which came to about over 800 hectares. The first phase of Gwarimpana. I came back to the office and told my boss, we're going to do an estate on this. So, in-house, I had 2 guys. I put 2 town planners I put on that job. And number 1, I made them understand we wanted houses that would recover FHA from the doldrums and bring it up. So the houses, no low income, that they must all be houses that people would buy and will make profit out of. The lowest house we designed for were bungalows. Then we had blocks of flats. We had, duplexes, twin. Then we had, detached houses. So we worked out the plans. The planners did design. Those 2 guys, Paul Aliu and Shaibu, the 2 of them were put into some contest. We would send them, go and design and bring. They'll bring. When they bring them, on the floor, I'll call the other senior officers. They'll look through and we would analyze and found out what was wrong either way. We continued this for days. Which eventually resulted to what you see here. So as soon as we finished this, I took the plan out. After getting this, architects to give us the type of houses we wanted, I took the plan out to the then MD, engineer Ibrahim Ali. And Ibrahim Ali took this plan straight to General Abacha. And General Abacha saw this and said, Ibrahim Ali has, resurrected FHA.
We are already running out of time. I wanted to ask you about your marital life, but it's like briefly, sir.
No, I have a wife. She's in the house with 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Okay. Yes.
I am asking you this question because you are a major stakeholder in the Nigeria's housing sector.
Yes.
In Abuja city here,
yes,
there are so many unoccupied houses.
Yes.
And people are in need of shelter
Yes.
above their heads. Why do we have so many unoccupied houses that littered the federal capital city, Abuja?
I think there are very many reasons, but the ones I can quickly think about are one, corruption. Number one is corruption. A lot of those houses you see out there, estates, are the result of corrupt enrichment of people. People who have earned a lot, good enough they didn't fly this loot outside. They decided to invest them here. Many of them are not bothered whether those houses are taken or not taken, because they believe that after a time, whoever is chasing them or doing what will stop chasing them. Then they would do what they want to do with them. So a lot of such corrupt enrichment have found their way into such houses, number one. And that's why you find there is no consideration or heart. The heart the man used to steal public money is the same heart with which he is keeping people away from using the houses or owning them.
Okay, the second one.
Yes. The second reason I would give, that comes to my mind, is that everybody thinks he can build an estate with or without plan. Estate development is a business. And because it is a business, it requires a pre-investment study. We do not have pre-investment studies. When I was in FHA, I rejected certain sites on grounds that if we built there, people wouldn't buy. For instance, FHA is now building in Zuba. If I were in FHA, I wouldn't go to Zuba and build. Why? Who would want to go and buy a house in Zuba? So the location you pick matters a great deal. Yes.
Elder, I wish we could continue with this our discussion, but it appears we are already out of time.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you as guest on the program. Viewer, that's how far we can go in today's edition of the program. With the hope you will make it a date with us sometime next week for another interesting episode. On behalf of our guest, Elder Eteng Ibiang Eteng, I remain yours, Muhammad Abubakar, saying bye for now.